If your surname is on this list, you are not just Swedish by chance. You are connected to a specific regiment, a specific stretch of frozen ground, a specific muster roll, signed by a corporal who knew he was sending men to die. Your ancestor was not a farmer who happened to pick up a musket. He was a soldier of the Swedish Empire, one of the Carolinian, and his name, the name you still carry, was assigned to him by the crown so that no officer could ever confuse him with another man in the line. 10 surnames, 10 bloodlines, and by the end of this video, you will know exactly where yours stands. Stay until number 1, because that surname carries a story the Swedish state spent nearly 2 centuries quietly letting fade from public memory. It is not folklore, it is a truth about how many men Sweden actually lost, and about the families the crown preferred the country would forget. What survived because ordinary people refused to let go of a single word. The name written on a soldier's croft door in 1700 and something. That word is number 1 on this list. Number 10. Rask. The word means swift, quick, sharp on the feet. And that is exactly why it was written into the muster roll of a young infantryman in the late 1600s. Because the officer needed a name that would fit on a wooden plaque nailed above the door of a soldier's croft, and because the man had already been noticed for his speed on the march. Under the allotment system formalized by Karl XI in 1682, every regiment needed unique names. Sweden was full of Andersons and Svenssons, and in the chaos of a battlefield roll call, one wrong ear could kill you. So the officers renamed men after virtues, after weapons, after what they saw in front of them. Rask was one of the first, but Rask was not known for parade drills. Rask was known for the columns that ran up the frozen slopes at Narva in November of the year 1700, when a Swedish army of around 10,000 men broke a Russian force 4 times its size in a snowstorm. If your surname is Rask, your bloodline runs through that column, the one that charged into near-total whiteout and shattered Peter the Great's first army before nightfall. Next comes a name that sounds like it belongs to a village blacksmith. But look at the muster rolls, and the men who carried it stood in the front rank, took the first volley, and buried more of their own than any other trade in the Swedish army. Number 9. Hjelm. The word means helmet, and that is what the soldier was, the man whose head was expected to take the blow. The name was handed out to infantrymen, most often pikemen and later musketeers, whose job was to hold the line while cavalry maneuvered behind them. It first appears in the rolls of provincial regiments in the mid-1600s. But the name earned its full weight during the 30 Years' War, when Swedish infantry, under Gustav II Adolf, marched through Germany and turned the war for the Protestant side. Every Hjelm on that roll marched at Breitenfeld in 1631, where the Swedes broke an imperial army that had been considered unbeatable. Many of them did not march home. If your surname is Hjelm, your bloodline runs through a regiment of infantry who stood shoulder to shoulder in front of Catholic cannon, and whose commander, the King of Sweden himself, was killed in battle the following year at Lutzen. Your name is the piece of armor he asked them to be. Next comes a name people assume is a compliment. It was. But it was also a warning about who the man was likely to be under fire. Number 8. Stolt. The word means proud, and the officers who wrote it into the rolls meant it in every sense: bearing, discipline, the refusal to break. It is one of the oldest soldier names still carried in Sweden. You find Stolt in cavalry squadrons and in guard regiments, because those were the units where officers needed men who could stand still under insult and move only on command. But pride, in the Carolinian army, was not a soft virtue. It was the reason men refused to give ground at Fraustadt in February of 1706, when a numerically smaller Swedish force under Reinskjöld destroyed a Saxon-Russian army in a battle so one-sided that European observers rewrote their understanding of infantry warfare. If your surname is Stolt, your family stood in a line that did not step back. Somewhere in your bloodline is a corporal who was told to hold, and held. The next name sounds domestic, almost gentle. It was neither. Number 7. Trygg. The word means safe, secure, loyal, the man you could trust at your back. It was given to soldiers marked in the rolls for reliability, the ones who did not desert on the long winter marches, the ones who could be posted as sentries and would still be there in the morning. Trig is a name of the late allotment era, appearing more often after the reforms of Karl XI, when regiments were tied permanently to specific provinces, and every soldier was known by his neighbors. But Trig carried its heaviest history in the Great Northern War. When Karl XII was killed at Fredrikstad in Norway in late 1718, it was the surviving foot soldiers, the reliable ones, the trusted ones, who were ordered to retreat across the Tidal Mountains in January of 1719. Roughly 3,000 of them froze to death in the snow, in what is remembered as the Carolinian Death March. If your surname is Trig, your ancestor was chosen for that name because his officer believed he would not run. Whether he came back down the mountain is another matter. Before we continue, if you are finding this useful, subscribe to Bloodlines Uncovered. Every week we release a new video on the secrets hidden inside surnames and bloodlines. Tap the subscribe button so you do not miss the next one. Because the next name on this list is one you have almost certainly seen and almost certainly underestimated. Number 6. Skjöld. The word means shield. It is one of the most direct soldier names in Swedish record, and it was given for exactly what it sounds like. The man expected to hold the line, to cover the man beside him, to be the reason the formation did not collapse. Skjöld appears in cavalry roles as well as infantry, because in the Carolinian army, the shield had become a metaphor for the whole ethic of the unit. The men who carried this name served in some of the hardest deployments the empire ever committed to, the Scanian War of 1675 to 1679. When Denmark tried to take back the southern provinces Sweden had seized a generation earlier, and battles like Lund in December of 1676, one of the bloodiest engagements ever fought on Nordic soil, where roughly half of every man committed became a casualty. If your surname is Skjöld, your bloodline runs through that snowbound field. Somewhere on it, one of your ancestors stood between the Danish cavalry and the men behind him. The next name sounds like a boast. It was, in fact, a job description. Number 5. Kæmpe. The word means fighter, or more precisely, champion. The man sent forward when negotiation failed. It was one of the more selective soldier names, given to men marked for aggression and stamina, rather than parade discipline. You do not find Kæmpe evenly across the rolls. You find him in the assault regiments, the ones committed to breakthrough attacks, and you find him in disproportionate numbers on the casualty lists after Poltava in June of 1709, the battle in Ukraine where Karl XII's army was destroyed in a single morning against Peter the Great, and where the Swedish Empire effectively ended. Roughly 7,000 Swedes were killed or wounded on the field. A few days later, at Perevolocna, most of what remained laid down its arms. Many never came home. If your surname is Kæmpe, your bloodline almost certainly passes through a man who was still alive at dawn on the 28th of June, and dead or captured by lunchtime. That is not exaggeration. That is what the regimental returns record. The next name sounds like an animal. It was chosen because the officer wanted the man to fight like one. Number 4. Björn. The word means bear. In the muster rolls, it appears in provincial regiments, particularly from the forested interior, Dalarna, Hälsingland, Ångermanland, where recruiting officers looked for men used to hard winters and heavy work. Björn was given for size, for strength, for the kind of quiet steadiness that mattered in a bayonet fight. Men named Björn served across the empire's campaigns, but the name is most closely tied in popular memory to Dalregementet, the regiment of Dalarna, one of the most decorated units in Swedish military history. At Poltava, Dalregementet went into the attack on the Russian redoubts and was cut apart at close range. A regiment of a little over 1,000 men was reduced to a fraction by the end of the day. If your surname is Björn and your family traces back to central or northern Sweden, your bloodline likely runs through a soldier's croft in a forest clearing where generations of men marched south to war and only fragments came home. The next name is a virtue, but in the Carolinian army, it was also a promise the state made to the man's family, and often broke. Number 3. Stark. The word means strong. It was given to soldiers valued for endurance rather than speed, for the ability to march 20 miles a day in full kit and still stand watch at night. Stark appears in the rolls from the mid-1600s onwards, and by the reign of Karl XII, the name had become associated with the elite infantry regiments that formed the core of the field army. Under the allotment system, a soldier named Stark received a torp, a small croft with a strip of land, held in exchange for lifetime military service. When he died, his son could inherit the obligation. Entire villages became dependent on the survival of one man in a distant war. During the Great Northern War, modern demographers estimate that Sweden mobilized somewhere in the region of 200,000 men from a total population of under 2 million, and that the losses were catastrophic enough to leave whole provinces missing a generation of adult males. If your surname is Stark, your bloodline runs through a family that gave a man to the crown every generation for over 100 years, and that was expected to plow the land while doing it. The next name is the most literal on the list. It is also, by a wide margin, the most feared. Number 2. Svad. The word means sword. The name was reserved, in most regiments, for soldiers who had distinguished themselves in close combat, or for cavalrymen assigned to the shock roll, the ones sent to break a line at the gallop. Svad appears in the rolls of the household regiments and in provincial cavalry, and it carried a specific reputation. A man named Svad was expected to close the distance. He was expected to be the last thing an enemy soldier saw. During the Scanian War, Swedish cavalry, under Karl XI himself, broke the Danish center at Lund, with a charge that historians still describe as one of the most desperate acts of leadership by a reigning monarch in early modern Europe. The king was 21 years old. Half his senior officers were dead by nightfall. If your surname is Svärd, your ancestor was on a horse in that line, or in one of the countless smaller actions where cavalry was ordered to sacrifice itself to buy the infantry 10 more minutes. He did not carry a weapon. He was named for one. And now, number 1. This surname was not simply forgotten. Its true history was quietly stripped out of the polite Swedish story of itself for nearly 2 centuries, because what it represented did not fit the tone the country wanted to take after the empire collapsed. When the Age of Liberty began in 1719, the new political order in Stockholm turned sharply away from the cult of the warrior king. The scale of Sweden's losses in the Great Northern War. Modern estimates suggest that as much as a third of adult Swedish men either died in the war, in Russian captivity, or on the long roads that never brought them back, was too politically dangerous to state plainly. Soldier families were absorbed back into the peasantry. The names on their croft doors stayed, but the meaning of those names was allowed to fade. Of all those names, this one was the proudest and the most exposed. This is what those families were quietly asked to forget. Number 1. Leon. The word means lion. It was the highest tier of soldier name in the Carolinian tradition, given sparingly and deliberately, most often to men who had been decorated in action or who had served in the household regiments closest to the king. It was also a direct echo of the title given to Gustav II Adolf himself, Legionet från Norden, the Lion of the North, the king who died leading a cavalry action in the fog at Lutzen on the 6th of November, 1632, and whose body was carried back to Sweden over months of ceremonial procession through half of Europe. To carry the name Legion in the 18th century was to be marked publicly as the descendant of a man who had served in the founding myth of the empire. After Poltava, and after Karl XII's death at Fredrikstad in 1718, that association became politically inconvenient. Many Leon families quietly changed their names during the 1800s, as urbanization accelerated and the old soldier titles began to feel like relics of a defeated era. The few families that kept the name, often at real social cost, did so because they refused to let the story disappear. If your surname is Legion, your bloodline is not just Swedish. It runs through the household regiments of the last great Swedish kings, through the memory of the Lion of the North, and through a quiet act of resistance, carried out by ancestors who refused to become anonymous when the state would have been happier if they had. 10 surnames, 10 bloodlines, 10 corridors leading back through frozen mountain passes, through the smoke at Breitenfeld, through the redoubts at Poltava, through a snowbound field outside Lund. Every one of them written by a corporal on a wooden plaque above a croft door, so that a single man in a single regiment could be told apart from every other man the crown had ever sent to die. Your surname is not just a name, it is a regiment, it is a province. It is a torp with a strip of land and a promise the crown made to your ancestors and did not always keep. It is a set of loyalties that men held onto in circumstances that would have broken almost anyone else. Write your surname in the comments and tell me which regiment you think your blood runs through. And if you know a specific story, a great-grandfather who came back from the east, a family torp still standing somewhere in Småland or Dalarna, a name that was changed and then quietly changed back, tell it, because those stories deserve to be heard. Subscribe to Bloodlines Uncovered so you catch the next one. The next video is already waiting for you.